Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about this really nice paper. It's called Pain and the Field of Affordances, an Inactive Approach to Acute and Chronic Pain. And the authors are Sabrina Coninx and Peter Stillwell. And so I'm not going to review the whole paper because it's quite a beast. I'm just going to review a couple of the ideas in it, and then I'm going to speculate about how these ideas might be applied to chronic pain. Yeah, I think it's just a really fantastic paper. It's open access. You can find it just through Google. Just type in the title, and I got mine through Springer Link. Read the whole thing, and I think it's a really interesting paper. Lots of depth to it. I'm just going to scratch the surface today. So in the title is this term affordances. You can see it also says an inactive approach to acute and chronic pain. And these are quite philosophical ideas, and the authors are applying these philosophical ideas that are based in sort of studies of perception, cognition, understanding of what mind might be, and applying it to this problem of understanding what the differences are between acute and chronic pain, because that's actually in the sort of academic world. The difference between acute and chronic pain, the transition between acute and chronic pain, is not a clear-cut thing. Okay, so what are affordances? Affordances I like to think of as opportunities for action. The term affordance comes from James Gibson and a branch of psychology called ecological psychology. And ecological psychology has a strong focus on the environment that we find ourselves in, and our perception, so the experiences that we have, are due to the way in which we interact with our environment around us. And the way that we interact with our environment is based on the action possibilities that we have, and these action possibilities are called affordances. Another way of saying it would be the environment around us affords to us certain kinds of actions. Okay, so that's the way that we're going to be sort of thinking about it. Affordances can be broken down into 4 different categories. We've got salience, valence, mindness, and temporal horizon. So these sound a little bit interesting, especially the last 2, but as I describe them, they'll make a little bit more sense. Salience is just a fancy way of saying how important it is to you. So remember, we're talking about affordances. So whether or not an action is important to do is otherwise known as its salience. So if you're walking along a path and you came across a snake, what kinds of actions would now become important to you? Perhaps stopping, jumping back, running in the opposite direction, focusing on the snake, like keeping it in your visual field. These are actions that you could have done before seeing the snake. Maybe not focusing on the snake, but stopping and jumping back and running the other way. Could have done all of those things. They were part of your affordance landscape, but they weren't important. So why do them? So actions can be important or not important. Valence refers to whether or not you think the outcome of that action will be positive or negative, right? So I've got the example here of a couple of guys making coffees at a barista machine. For me, walking up and ordering a cup of coffee is something that's really positively valenced. I believe that it will have a positive outcome because I love the taste and feel of coffee. If I went and another affordance available to me is just leaving the cafe, to me that affordance has a negative valence, right? It's got a potential negative outcome because I do like that feeling of caffeine, and I'd be missing out on this thing that I really enjoy doing. So affordances can differ in terms of whether or not we think the outcome is going to be positive or negative. Thirdly, affordances can differ in terms of their mindness. So this one's a little bit different. Mindness refers to how much control you have or ownership you feel you have over that affordance. So what they've said here is that affordances can differ in perceived mindness. The term mindness is commonly associated with intimate familiarity. The intimate familiarity we have with our own experiences, i.e. the irreducible, minimal sense that an experience belongs to oneself. So for me, playing the guitar is an activity or an affordance that has a strong sense of mindness to it. I've played guitar for a little over 15 years now, and it's something that is deeply tied into my identity. It's a big part of who I believe I am. And if I was to play a violin, for example, that's not something that I've got a rich history with. It's not something that I feel is mine. And I'd feel like I don't have much control or ownership over that instrument. So I'd have a low sense of mindness. So the affordances available to us will differ in terms of how much we feel they're deeply tied to our sense of self, and how much sort of ownership and familiarity we have with them. Lastly, temporal horizon is just a fancy way of saying how it relates to the future. Philosophers like to make things sound really deep and interesting. And I think using a term like temporal horizon is maybe heading in that direction. I love it when people talk like this. But, you can probably simplify it and say how the affordance relates to the future. So an easy way of describing this might be, if you water a seedling, that's an affordance, that's an action that you have available to you. And the reason why you're watering that seedling is because you're thinking that's going to grow. The affordance of putting money into a savings account is, a future-directed affordance. Going to the gym and lifting weights is, working your body so that, over time you become stronger. If you feel like you're going to sneeze and you grab a tissue and put it to your nose, you're not doing that to prevent, mess 15 years down the track. You're doing that to change something happening here in the here and now. So that's an action that has a temporal horizon, which is, quite short. So all of the things around us differ in terms of how all of the affordances available to us differ in terms of how they relate to the future. Okay, so how do acute and chronic pains differ from one another besides their temporality? This is a question that's asked in the paper. Basically, how do they differ apart from chronic pain just being around longer than acute pain? And here's some of the ways in which the authors have suggested that they're different according to affordances, but I haven't gone into all of them. These are just a couple that I've picked out. So in acute pain, let's say someone's rolled their ankle, the body comes into focus. So we're talking about salience here, so what kinds of affordances are important. When you're scanning your environment and scanning your body, the body now becomes a really important source of information because you've hurt yourself. Where previously, when you don't have pain, it wasn't as important. So the body comes into focus. Certain protective behaviours become more important. Perhaps putting ice on it, elevating it, compressing it, some rest. Not putting too much weight down through it. These sorts of things that we know to do when you've injured yourself become important. You could do all of those things when you don't have pain, but they're not important actions to take. You can see how the affordances that are available to us are deeply connected to the social structure that we find ourselves in as well. If you found yourself in an environment in which putting ice onto an injury was a really strange thing to do, and you weren't brought up with that then what are the chances that you're going to put ice on an injury? It's very slim. So our affordances are deeply tied to our beliefs and environment, our social environment as well. Importantly, as the body heals, these protective behaviours start to decrease. So you get changes in the salience of affordances as the body heals. With chronic pain, it's quite different. The body is still a big focus, so the importance is placed on the body, and so too is finding relief. If you think about there being lots of different opportunities for action available to everybody, someone who has chronic pain would see opportunities that might result in relief as more important than someone who doesn't have chronic pain, right? Which makes sense, because pain and the relief of pain is an important target. Avoidance of pain is also an important factor, and actions in your environment that might result in pain are important because they should be avoided. You also sometimes see this sort of medicalisation of life. The decisions that someone with chronic pain makes about whether or not to do something are largely based on whether or not that decision will have an impact on their experience of pain. And the medical world is deeply tied to those decisions, right? So certain medications, certain therapies, they are sort of very interconnected and form a large part of a person who has chronic pain's affordance landscape. When talking about valence, so this is once again talking about whether or not we perceive the outcome of certain actions to have a positive or a negative outcome. So in acute pain, you see, sort of normal action having a negative outcome. So, walking normally on a sprained ankle is not going to be a fun experience, and so that is, temporarily, that's a key word, temporarily associated with a negative experience. And then rest and recovery becomes positive, right? So you see this sort of mild flipping of the valence landscape, where normal action, which might normally be positive, becomes negative. Rest and recovery, which might be in certain contexts seen as negative, might be positive. In chronic pain, it's the same story, but it's a longer and deeper story. Rather than normal action, I take from the paper this idea that meaningful action has now become associated with pain in a very deep way. This is not true of everybody with chronic pain, obviously, but if pain is limiting your ability to engage and interact with the world around you, then it stands to reason that meaningful activities would be impacted by pain. And so those meaningful activities are still affordances, they're still afforded to you, but the outcome of those meaningful activities might be associated with negative emotions or negative experiences such as pain. And then avoidance might be rewarded in that avoiding certain activities and noticing that you didn't have pain, you might get a sort of a feedback reward from that avoidance. It might feel terrible that you're not able to do the thing that you love, but you're still rewarded in some sense because you don't have a flaring up of your pain, or you don't experience the pain during. Mindness, this is where I think things get quite interesting. In acute pain, your body becomes a barrier to smooth engagement with the world. So let's say in this person's example, they've hurt their back gardening. It's now hard to garden because they've got a sore back. But they're still embodied, they're still sort of connected to themselves and connected to their environment. They're still able to sort of to do the things they need to do. And they still have trust that their body will get better and improve over time. The actions are hard, right? So gardening might be hard, but it's still their action. It's still their thing. Now let's flip over to someone who's been experiencing pain for a much longer time. When you try to and fail, try to and fail, try to and fail, try to use your body in a certain way, try to do a certain activity that you used to do, try to work, etc., and it doesn't work for you, you may experience a feeling of loss of control or loss of influence on the things that are around you. That may have an impact on your identity, right? As I was saying before, I take a lot of my identity is tied up in playing guitar. But if I had a chronic pain issue and I wasn't able to play guitar, then that would have a pretty substantial impact on my sense of self, right? My sense of that affordance being mine if I can't do it. Okay. It could lead to feelings of dissociation, right? If you're not able to smoothly engage with the world over a long period of time, you might start to feel distanced and separated and isolated from the world. Now, talking about temporal horizon, acute pain, you think of as sort of like a short-term disruption to engaging with the world, but long-term plans are largely pain-free. So you might have someone who's an athlete that's injured themselves playing their sport. They can't currently engage with their sport, but they know that by doing certain things over time, they will be able to re-engage with their sport. So they'll be looking for things that they can do in the present, affordances available to them that will improve their likelihood of getting back to their sport faster. In chronic pain, because there's a long history of having pain, the belief that pain will be part of the future is, a pretty reasonable belief to have. If it's been around for this long, chronic pain is such a complex problem, nobody seems to know what's going on with me. The likelihood that pain is a part of a future is a high one. And so those affordances that the person with acute pain has, the ones in which they're making they're acting in such a way that those actions are leading to a future without pain, those affordances aren't seen as important or available to someone who has chronic pain. That's often paired with the belief that there's irreversible damage, that what's happened to the body is irreparable, can't be changed. And the potential consequence of this is that rather than there being a future focus, behaving in such a way that your body and your situation changes slowly over time, there may be a focus on just sort of getting through the day or getting through the week, getting enough sort of pain relief in order to manage symptoms so that things can get done now. And so when we're thinking about a temporal horizon, it might be that in chronic pain there's this sort of shrinking of the temporal horizon. So how can we use this? I just gave a really sort of whirlwind overview of the deep ideas in this paper. Now I'm going to go into some personal speculations as to how you can use this information if you are someone who has chronic pain, or if you're someone who's treating chronic pain. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few ideas that I think kind of fit into this narrative. Okay, so for salience, pain relieving strategies become important. It might be good to get smart about the pain relieving strategies that actually provide relief. There's pretty good evidence to show that not everything that we do that has worked in the past will continue to work now. And so getting smart about the types of things that provide actual relief, it may be useful. Which kind of leads to my next point of under-medicalising your life. There's fairly good research to show now that that biomedicine doesn't have all the answers for chronic pain. So finding strategies outside of biomedicine that don't have a direct focus on pain relief and fixing the problem might be a nice way to start to under-medicalise your life. Things like engaging socially with people that you have good relationships with, keeping generally fit and healthy and active, taking care of your mental health, trying to get enough sleep, engaging in activities that you find meaningful and calming and enjoyable. These sorts of things are available to you if you just start small and slowly build your way up. And it's gradually embarking on a process of reducing the influence that that this problem has on your life. So you can hear that I'm obviously being very vague here because I don't love applying concepts broadly to everybody who has chronic pain. But it may be that that's an important part of your life. By not directly focusing on getting pain relief and focusing on other aspects of your life, paradoxically, people often experience quite dramatic relief in their pain. So that's this process of under-medicalising. I guess this comes hand in hand with getting clear on your values. If you know what it is that you really value in life, then you can start to slowly work towards those values. For me, I really value keeping active, trying new things, being social with friends, seeing family, having deep conversations with people. And I know that those are the things I like to do. And so I seek out opportunities to have those sorts of experiences. Whereas if I wasn't so clear on what I value, then I wouldn't really know where to aim. Lastly, immerse yourself in the world. You may remember that I spoke about the body becoming a focus of attention in pain, and that's it's at the detriment of one's relationship to the environment and the world around them. So doing things, planning activities that immerse you in your environment might be a really nice way of, even if it's just for that period of time, taking you out of your body and into the world that's around you. There's pretty good research showing that virtual reality is is quite analgesic. And when I say analgesic, it has a positive impact on someone's pain while they're using virtual reality. And I think that the reason for that is virtual reality is so immersive and engaging that the person can't help but be out of their body and into this virtual world. So if you immerse yourself in environments that are stimulating just like a virtual world, for me that's being out in nature, going down to the beach, going for a bushwalk, watching a really good movie, going to a concert. You know, these sorts of things over time might start to change your relationship to your world and your relationship to your body. Valence, I think it's important to have lots of positive movement experiences. If you have lots of positive movement experiences, that would mean that movements are associated with a positive outcome, more likely. If you don't know how to have positive movement experiences, that's what I'm going to try and set up with this profile here. I'm going to start to put out some videos in which movement is associated with good feelings. Challenge your avoidance strategies, the actions that you think that might result in a negative outcome or pain. That's not a given. So it might be worth, in a controlled way, starting to challenge these avoidance strategies and see if those strategies that might have worked for you in the past are still relevant today. Planning joyful activities. This is just about, bringing more joy and positive valence into your life. And through social support and connection. I think it's important to get the network of people around you on board with what it is you're trying to do. And if that means bringing in a healthcare professional or someone who can help guide you through that process, or a few people, if you have the resources for that, then that can be really useful too. Moving on to mindness. Embodiment practices. So these are basically things that you can do to make you feel more connected and grounded in your body. I won't go into detail here, but they can give you a better sense of this body being yours. Learning something new. So the process of learning something is basically the process of getting more control over the environment around you, getting a sense of mastery and skill. And by doing that, you get a sense of that thing being yours. Self-reflection, so having a diary, asking yourself questions about yourself, whatever your process of reflecting on who you are and what your values are, and how you felt that day, or whatever it is. I think that process is important to get a better sense of self and get a better sense of this is who I am. This is my life. This is my story. Temporal horizon. So we're saying that with chronic pain, often the actions in the present aren't working towards a future without pain, but perhaps setting some smart goals, some really basic things that you're working towards that get a sense of improvement over time is really healthy to start to open up that temporal horizon. And hopefully that results in some small wins. They don't need to be massive wins, but just small wins over time. And then I think learning about adaptability, so learning about how the body can adapt and change over time, that we're not a car. If a car's left outside, it will rust and decay. A human body, on the other hand, is a living system, and it adapts and changes to the things that we put in and the things that we do. So when it comes to an injury, learning about adaptability can give you a sense in which there's a future in which pain is not as big a part of your life, or pain is not even a part of your life, or at least not this chronic debilitating pain. And so I learn about adaptability quite a lot through my job, and it gives me a strong sense of optimism when it comes to the management of pain and injury, because I just know how impressive the body is at healing if you give it the right environment and you just give it the right dose of quote unquote medicine. So anyway, that's it's my summary of this sort of aspect of this paper. If you want to read it, it's open access through Springer Link. I thoroughly recommend you do that, but be prepared for some fairly long words and challenging ideas. Thank you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to them. But otherwise, yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.